Hey everyone, welcome back to another Explainer. Today we're taking a massive 10,000-foot view of human evolution right in the Indian subcontinent. We are literally going to compress 5,000 years of history just to understand exactly how society evolved over time. We'll track how our ancestors went from surviving as wandering nomads wielding rough stone tools, all the way to building highly planned, incredibly advanced urban cities, and ultimately sparking some of the greatest spiritual revolutions in human history. It's a truly fascinating story of cause and effect, so let's get right into it.
Okay, let's dive into this. Just to give us a quick cognitive map so we don't get lost, here is our agenda for today. We're going to start with the Stone Age foundations, then move on to the Indus Valley Civilization, cover the early and later Vedic ages, and finally wrap things up with the rise of new religions.
Chronologically, our journey kicks off way back in the Paleolithic Age, around 2 million years ago. Then we're going to fast forward quite a bit to the urban miracle of the Indus Valley, around 2600 BCE, transition into the early and later Vedic ages from 1500 to 1000 BCE, and finally land around 600 BCE. What we're really tracking here is the ultimate cause and effect chain of human civilization. It's like a giant puzzle. A change in tools leads to a change in food, which naturally leads to a change in society, and eventually a total change in human philosophy.
All right, Section 1, the Stone Age foundations, going from nomads to farmers.
This is the absolutely crucial era where human beings slowly stopped wandering and actually started settling down. First up, in the Paleolithic Age, humans were entirely dependent on nature. They were just hunter-gatherers using heavy, rough, unpolished stone tools to survive. But then, the climate started warming up. That brings us to the Mesolithic period, where people began domesticating animals, like sheep and dogs, and they started creating these tiny, razor-sharp stone tools called microliths. But the real game changer, that's the Neolithic Age. This was a full-blown agricultural revolution. Humans actually became food producers for the first time. They started cultivating rice and wheat, they invented pottery to store all that extra food, and they built the very first settled villages.
Now here's a really fascinating twist. While the northern parts of the subcontinent were eventually evolving through the use of copper, something completely different was happening down south. Around 1000 BCE, we see the rise of what are called megaliths. These are massive, single-stone structures used primarily as elaborate burial sites or memorials, and they are incredible clues for us today. By looking at the goods buried inside these megaliths, some had rich gold ornaments, others just had simple, everyday pots, and many actually contained iron tools. Archaeologists can trace the varying social status of these ancient people. It really marks their direct transition straight into the Iron Age.
Moving on to Section 2, the Indus Valley Civilization, an absolute urban miracle.
Jumping to 2600 BCE, we hit a civilization that honestly rivaled and, in a lot of ways, totally exceeded contemporary societies in ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt. Think about this. Over 4,000 years ago, these people were building entire cities on strict 90-degree right-angle street grids. Think of modern planned cities today like Chandigarh, while the Indus Valley people did it first. They had brilliant underground drainage systems with settling pools just to trap waste and prevent clogs. They constructed their homes using standardized baked bricks instead of mud that would easily wash away in the rain. And of course, they built massive public works like the Great Bath of Mohenjo-Daro, which was likely used for ritual purification. Their level of civic planning was, quite frankly, staggering.
So, just how big was this whole thing? Well, imagine over 2,000 separate settlements. That's the number of Indus Valley sites we've discovered so far, stretching all the way across present-day India, Pakistan, and even into Afghanistan. It perfectly illustrates the massive, interconnected scale of this society. They thrived for centuries before shifting river courses and other environmental changes caused their gradual decline around 1700 BCE. Next up, Section 3, the early Vedic Age and the arrival of the Aryans.
As those incredible Indus cities eventually faded away, a completely new chapter opened up. The Indo-Aryans arrived in the northwest land of seven rivers around 1500 BCE, bringing with them the compilation of humanity's oldest surviving text, the Rig Veda. Now, to really understand their mindset, you just have to consider this one concept. Cattle is the basic measure of wealth. This was primarily a pastoral society. They weren't fighting massive bloody wars over land boundaries. No, they fought over cows. In fact, the actual word for battle in the Rig Veda literally translates to a search for cows. Kings, or Rajans, were basically tribal leaders who didn't even collect mandatory taxes yet. They just relied on voluntary offerings from their people. It was a remarkably fluid, mobile, and cattle-centric society.
Which brings us to Section 4, the later Vedic Age, an era defined by iron, agriculture, and hierarchy.
Well, societies never stay fluid forever, do they? Around 1000 BCE, a massive societal shift occurred as people began expanding eastward into the dense forests of the Gangetic Plains. And this created a stark contrast to what came before. In the early Vedic days, remember, you had a pastoral economy, highly flexible social roles where your daily job didn't depend on your birth, and women actively participated in tribal assemblies. But in the later Vedic Age, thanks to the discovery of iron, they could suddenly clear out thick forests and establish a massive agricultural economy. But with settled land came the rise of powerful territorial kings and, most importantly, a very rigid social hierarchy determined purely by birth.
And that strict social ladder? That is the Varna system. It strictly divided society into four main buckets: the Brahmins or priests, the Kshatriyas or warriors, the Vaishyas who were the merchants and farmers, and the Shudras, the laborers. Because the Brahmins held the total monopoly on increasingly complex and expensive religious rituals, and because this new system locked people into their social status from the exact moment they were born, deep social tensions began to brew. And it's exactly this tension that paved the way for our final historical shift. And that leads perfectly into our final era, Section 5, the rise of new religions, specifically Jainism and Buddhism.
All right, enter the 6th century BCE. We are now at a true watershed moment in history, totally driven by powerful philosophical movements pushing back hard against the rigid, orthodox rituals of the later Vedic period. Let's see how this builds, because to really get why these new religions exploded in popularity, we got to look at the economics. First, those iron tools we talked about allowed people to clear the Gangetic forests for mass agriculture. That led to an incredible agricultural surplus, which then boosted trade, grew new cities, and brought about the invention of coinage. And because of that boom, the Vaishyas, the merchant class, became incredibly wealthy. Yet despite all their money, they were still stuck in the middle tier of that rigid Varna system, so they actively sought out social mobility by backing new egalitarian religions that simply didn't care about the birth hierarchy.
There was just this massive night-and-day cultural contrast between the established Vedic orthodoxy and these fresh new faiths. While the orthodoxy strictly used Sanskrit, which was a language pretty much only understood by the elite, Jainism and Buddhism preached directly in Prakrit, the everyday language of the commoners. Where the old ways demanded extremely costly animal sacrifices, the new religions championed strict nonviolence, or ahimsa. And honestly, that was fantastic for merchants who just wanted peaceful trade. Plus, while the old system enforced rigid social boundaries based on birth, these new paths were open to absolutely everyone. You can easily see why movements led by figures like Mahavira and Gautama Buddha caught on like wildfire.
Let's zoom in on Jainism for just a second, specifically the concept of Kaivalya. In Jainism, Kaivalya is the attainment of ultimate knowledge and complete liberation from worldly misery. It was famously achieved by Vardhamana Mahavira at the age of 42. But get this, it happened only after 12 grueling years of extreme asceticism. We're talking wandering, fasting, and meditating nonstop. This represents such a radical shift in human thought. People were moving away from materialistic sacrifices aimed at just gaining wealth or cattle and moving toward a profound, internal quest for real spiritual liberation.
Which brings us to our final thought. We've journeyed all the way from Paleolithic hunters striking unpolished stones together to enlightened philosophers totally reshaping the world, all over the course of 5,000 years. So I want to leave you with this question to chew on. How do the echoes of these ancient social structures, from the lingering dynamics of caste to the powerful, enduring philosophy of nonviolence, how do they still shape modern India today? You see, history isn't just some boring list of facts in the past. It lives and breathes in the systems, beliefs, and the daily lives we all navigate right now. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible explainer, and remember to keep questioning the world around you.